I heard it before I saw it, the soft scrape of her heel against the tile, followed by a pause, too long to be casual. Then her voice, low, almost a whisper, like she was afraid the cabinets might hear her. I miss you too. No, he's upstairs. Just got out of the shower. A pause, a quiet laugh. You're so bad. Another pause. And then, next time, don't leave that mark. I had to cover it with concealer. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. I just watched from the hallway monitor, one ear still wet from the towel slung around my neck. Her face was barely in frame, lit soft by the under-cabinet LEDs. But her voice, clear. Her hand holding the phone close, thumb stroking the side of it like it meant something. And then, her eyes shifted. She glanced around, lowered her voice even more. All right, one kiss, quick. She leaned toward the phone like a child playing pretend and made the sound. A kiss. To someone who wasn't me. It wasn't rage that settled in my chest. It was silence. The kind that comes when everything finally lines up and you wish just for a second you didn't know what you know, but I did. And there was no unknowing it. The motion sensor had kicked on at 8:43 p.m. I had installed the new cameras 9 days ago, 3 for the front yard, 1 for the garage, 1 for the living room, and just one, hidden behind the vent cover on the bookshelf, angled perfectly toward the kitchen entry. If you're still listening and any of this feels uncomfortably familiar, hit like and subscribe. Most people just listen in silence, but that one click tells the team these stories matter. She didn't know it had recorded, didn't know I could rewind, clip, export. By the time she was washing dishes, humming softly like nothing happened, I already had it trimmed to 10 seconds. Her voice, his name, and that fake kiss that told me everything I needed. I sat at the kitchen table, towel still damp around my shoulders, watching the footage on my phone. Her back was to me. She looked calm, normal, like a wife cleaning up after dinner. But it wasn't just dishes she was scrubbing, it was a timeline. She thought she had erased the hours that didn't add up, the cold showers, the uncharged phone, the hollow explanations about late meetings and girls' nights with no photos, no receipts. I thought I'd confront her, that I'd throw my phone on the counter and ask her to explain the man she whispered to, but I didn't. I watched, I pressed mute, I stared at her shoulders, the slope of her neck, the way she moved with such practiced grace like nothing in the world could touch her. And I realized then I didn't want answers. I wanted proof. I wanted precision. So I stood up, set my phone down gently, and walked out to the garage. The USB drives were in the drawer under my workbench. I slid one in my pocket, not because I needed it yet, but because I would. When I came back inside, she was wiping down the counter with that little blue cloth, the one we'd gotten in a 3-pack from Costco. She looked up and smiled. Hey, want some tea? I smiled back. Sure, that'd be nice. Her betrayal didn't need a confrontation. Not yet. It needed lighting, clarity, timestamp. And now, it had all 3. The next morning, I woke up before she did. Her phone was face down on the nightstand, her breathing slow, calm, like she hadn't erased anything, like the past 12 hours hadn't shifted the ground we stood on. I didn't reach for her. I didn't even look at her for long. Just slipped out of bed, padded down the hall, and opened the office drawer where I kept my backup drives. The footage had already been exported, but I trimmed it again. A tighter cut, no filler, just the part where she says his name, Greg, and that soft, juvenile kiss into the phone. The fake intimacy of someone who thought they were safe behind closed doors. I saved the file under one word, Tuesday. Then I copied it to 2 USBs, labeled both. One I slipped into a small envelope. The other I placed in a fireproof lockbox, just in case. She stirred around 7:15, asked if I wanted eggs. I said sure. Over easy, she hummed as she cooked, kissed me on the cheek, told me I looked tired. I told her I'd be working late. The drive to Meredith's house felt longer than it used to. We'd been close once before things got complicated, before the group hangouts thinned out and texts went unanswered. She lived in a quiet cul-de-sac, white shutters, wreath on the door, one of those neighborhoods where nothing dramatic ever happens, until it does. She answered after 3 knocks. Robe, slippers, slightly red eyes. Maybe she hadn't slept well either. Hey, she said, hesitant, confused. I held up the envelope. You'll want to watch the one labeled Tuesday. That was all. No explanations. No backstory. I didn't wait for questions. Just turned and walked back to the car. She didn't call after me, didn't ask what it was, just held the envelope like it weighed more than it should. This wasn't about revenge, not yet. This was about confirmation, about honoring the instinct that had been gnawing at me for months. The missing hours, the shift in tone, the sudden defensiveness over a locked phone, the way her stories never quite aligned, too vague to be truth, too specific to be casual. I didn't need to explode, I didn't need to scream. All I needed was a timestamp, and now Meredith had one too. I drove home slowly, no music, just the ticking of the blinker and the occasional thump of uneven asphalt. The sun was still rising when I pulled into the driveway. She was in the kitchen again, phone in hand, laughing at something on the screen. When she saw me, she smiled. Back already? I thought you were working late. I forgot something, I said, grabbing my briefcase. She nodded, unfazed. Still confident in whatever lie she thought was holding, still sure that silence meant ignorance, but it didn't. It meant precision, and I was done giving her the benefit of the doubt. She lit a candle after dinner, one of the ones we only used on holidays, cranberry and cedar wood, said it made her feel cozy, like when we first moved in. She curled up next to me on the couch and tucked her legs under mine, like we were college sweethearts again, not a couple avoiding eye contact most mornings. "I've missed this," she whispered. "Us, the way we used to be." I didn't flinch, didn't ask her to explain what used to be meant. I just nodded slowly and rested my arm along the back of the couch. She took it as an invitation, leaned in closer. Her hand slid up my chest, not urgently, just enough to say, "See, I'm trying." She laughed more that weekend, touched more, cooked breakfast in just her robe and offered to scrub the bathrooms without me asking. Like some old part of her had come back from the dead and was trying too hard not to show the dirt still clinging to its hands. By Sunday afternoon, she suggested we do a reset, said it like she'd read it in a blog. I played along, told her sure, we could tidy up the living room together. Small stuff first, magazines, the old throw blanket, charging cables tangled near the armrest. She was all lightness and jokes as she tossed a few books back on the shelf, humming like she had nothing to hide. But I wasn't watching her hands. I was watching her eyes. She reached for a candle on the middle shelf, then paused, just for a second. Her gaze snagged on the vent panel, right above the spine of that thick gray travel book she never actually read, the one I hadn't moved since installing the camera. Her smile twitched, only slightly, not enough for someone else to notice. But I did. She blinked fast, then looked away. Too fast. I handed her a small stack of magazines. "These go?" I asked. She nodded too quickly, voice higher than normal. "Yeah, recycle them. Totally forgot we still had those." That's when I knew. She didn't know what I knew, but she knew something had shifted. Her body moved through the space like it always had, but her mind was somewhere else now, running equations, replaying moments, trying to figure out if she'd been seen, if something had slipped. When she leaned down to fix the blanket draped across the couch, she looked again, this time pretending to check for dust. I watched from the corner of my eye. No direct stare. I didn't give her that satisfaction, because whatever theory she was building in her head, I wasn't going to interrupt it. Let her wonder if it was something she said, something she left unlocked. Let her guess what Tuesday meant. The room smelled like wax and burnt sugar, the kind of sweet that turns bitter if you leave it too long. She stood in the center of the room, hands on her hips, and smiled again. "Looks better already, huh?" "Yeah," I said, folding the blanket neatly, almost like nothing ever happened. She didn't respond, just nodded and walked toward the kitchen, but her steps had a hesitation I hadn't seen before. She had no idea where the trap was, but she had started to smell it. She thought I'd gone to bed. The lights were off in the living room. The hallway was dark, but I was sitting in the armchair by the window, just beyond the curtain, phone in hand, watching her reflection in the glass. She moved quietly, barefoot, in that soft navy sleep shirt she only wore when she wanted to feel harmless. I could hear her breathing before she reached the bookshelf. Short, uneven, not the calm, controlled rhythm of someone grabbing a novel before bed. She wasn't reaching for a book. She was staring at the vent panel. Frozen. I watched her tilt her head just slightly, as if testing the angle. Then her hand came up. Not to touch it, just hover, like she already knew. Like her body remembered something her words hadn't caught up to yet. She stood there, perfectly still, for maybe 10 seconds. Then she spun around, pale, eyes locked on where she thought I was sleeping upstairs. "How long have we had cameras?" Her voice cracked halfway through the sentence. I waited 2 beats before answering, let it hang just long enough. 9 days, she didn't say a word, didn't blink, just turned and bolted up the stairs. I stayed in the chair, still, calm. The phone in my hand buzzed exactly 8 minutes later. Unauthorized login attempt, living room hub, 12:03 a.m. I smiled without smiling. She'd cracked. No poker face, no plausible excuse about wanting to review footage for fun or check the front porch camera. She'd gone straight for the source. And not just to watch it, to erase it. The deletion attempt wasn't even subtle. Whoever she called or whatever she tried logging in with didn't match the registered device list. The system caught it immediately, rejected it, logged the IP, tagged the time. I tapped into the admin log, watched the cursor move through menus she never even knew existed, saw her flip through folders, each name colder than the last. Living room till 12:01, office till 11:29, garage till 11:30. She opened the one labeled Tuesday, tried to delete it, failed. I closed the app and sat with the silence. It was rich now, heavier than before. Not confusion, not suspicion, confirmation. I didn't need a confession. I had metadata, server logs, timestamps, the kind of evidence no apology could dilute. Upstairs, I heard a drawer slam, footsteps pacing, then nothing. Not a creak, not a breath. She was figuring it out. Not just what I'd seen, but what it meant, the depth of it, the weight, the timeline. Because that clip she tried to erase, it wasn't just a moment, it was a mirror, and now she was staring straight into it. She came down the stairs like the house was on fire. Not panicked in the way you'd expect, no sobbing, no begging, just frantic, with a coat half pulled on, phone clutched in her right hand, bare feet smacking against the hardwood as she turned the corner. Her eyes found me instantly. I was already seated at the dining table, tea steeping in front of me, spoon resting across the saucer. There was a file I didn't recognize, she started. Her voice was sharp, high with a forced edge of confusion, like she hadn't just spent the last 10 minutes trying to erase the digital footprint of her own undoing. I didn't even look up right away. I reached for the spoon, gave the tea one slow stir, and then met her eyes. Too late, I said calmly. His wife already has a copy. Everything stopped. She blinked. Once. Then again, like if she kept doing it, the sentence might disappear. She opened her mouth and shut it. Her knees bent, and for a second I thought she might sit, but she didn't. She just stood there, one hand on the back of the chair, across from me, the other still gripping her phone like it could save her. "Greg," she whispered. Not to me, not even really to herself, just the sound of the name hanging in the room, like saying it out loud might rewind time or soften the edges of what she knew was coming. But the moment passed, and all she had left was the weight of it. Her hand slipped from the chair. She slowly lowered herself into it, eyes still locked on me, like I might offer her a chance to fix this, to explain it away, but I didn't. I took a sip of my tea, let the warmth settle behind my teeth, and said nothing. She tried again. I was just trying to understand what you'd seen. You didn't mean to get caught, I said, still not raising my voice. But you did. She fell silent. The only sound in the room was the faint hum of the fridge and the soft clink of my spoon when I set it down again. Her shoulders, always so straight, started to slope inward. Her eyes dropped to the table. Did she swallowed. Did Meredith say anything? No, I said. She didn't have to. She blinked hard. I watched the tears start to gather but not fall. She wasn't crying from guilt. She was crying from loss, of control, of story, of timing. I leaned back in my chair, folded my hands across my lap, and studied her. This was the moment she realized the story had been taken from her. Not just the secret, but the power, the version she thought she'd get to tell, the silence she assumed I'd keep, and she had nothing left to bargain with. I stood up slowly, walked my empty cup to the sink, rinsed it, and placed it on the drying rack. She stayed seated, hands clenched in her lap, looking down like a child who knew the scolding wouldn't come, but also that the damage couldn't be undone. As I passed behind her on the way to the hallway, she turned her head slightly. "What now?" she asked quietly. I didn't stop walking. "Now?" I said. "Now nothing?" And I meant it. No drama, no shouting, just silence. The kind that doesn't invite forgiveness, doesn't ask for closure, just ends things. Quietly, completely. She didn't sleep that night. I know because I didn't either. I heard her in the hallway twice, and first around 2 a.m., then again just before 4. Soft footsteps, the floor creaking in places we both knew by heart. She hovered outside the bedroom door once, then walked away. I didn't move. I lay still and listened. By morning, she was already dressed, still barefoot, but her hair was brushed. She had that quiet, stunned look of someone hoping the day would press reset, but deep down, knowing it wouldn't. I made coffee. Cup. It's for hers. She sat on the far end of the couch, legs tucked under her, staring at nothing. No phone, no show running, just her and the dull hum of the refrigerator. Around 9:15, I opened my phone and searched his name. Greg's Facebook? Gone. His LinkedIn, disabled. Instagram, wiped clean. Meredith's pages were the same. Offline, silent, no statements, no captions, just a digital disappearance. And she must have checked too, because when I glanced over, she was just holding her phone, screen black, thumbs unmoving, like she didn't trust herself to open anything. I didn't ask questions. I didn't need answers. Everything I needed was already unraveling. At 10:47, she finally looked up. Her lips parted like she was about to speak, but nothing came out. Her expression said enough. She was waiting, hoping for a cue, an opening, some hint that she could spin this back into something survivable. Instead, I picked up my jacket from the hook by the door. "Where are you going?" she asked, voice low. "Out," I said, reaching for my keys. "For how long?" I looked at her, not with anger, not with affection, just clarity. "I'll be back by Monday." I didn't wait for her response. I didn't slam the door or pause for dramatic effect. I just left. The driveway was silent. No apology trailing behind me, no footsteps begging me to stay. I got in the car and drove. Not toward anywhere in particular, I just needed miles between us. Distance I could feel. I stopped at a small town motel about 4 hours south. No reservations, no questions. Just cash and a key. The room was plain. Beige walls, rough towels, TV bolted to the dresser. But it was quiet, and I could breathe. She texted once that night. "Can we talk?" No punctuation, no blame. Just a threadbare request. I didn't answer. The next day, "Please just tell me what you're thinking." Still nothing from me. By Sunday night, the messages had stopped altogether. Her silence, once a weapon, now came back like a mirror she couldn't avoid. And in that motel room with the hum of the AC and the sound of nothing else, I realized I didn't miss her voice. I didn't miss anything. Because when someone spends long enough using silence to control the room, the worst thing you can do to them is leave them alone with it. The texts changed tone by Thursday. They went from soft guilt to sharp worry, then to panic masked as politeness. "Just checking in. Are you okay? I think we should talk about what's next. I know I hurt you, but we can figure this out. Please don't shut me out. This house is still my home too." I read them. Everyone. I didn't respond. I wasn't interested in watching her rehearse empathy, not now that the audience had left. I stayed gone through Sunday night, drove home just before dawn Monday morning. She wasn't there. I didn't expect her to be. But the kitchen smelled like fear. Not the kind you breathe in, but the kind that lingers on untouched dishes, folded blankets, shoes left too neatly by the door. I brewed coffee, sat at the dining table again. Same chair, same silence. Later that day, she showed up at my office, unannounced. She looked worn, hair tied back hastily, sunglasses still on top of her head. She had that rattled poise, like someone trying to hold dignity in both hands but watching it leak through her fingers. "I just want to understand where we are," she said, standing in the doorway. "You can't just go dark and pretend I don't exist." I didn't argue. I motioned toward the chair across from my desk. She sat. She expected a confrontation. What she got was a folder. A manila folder, thin, quiet, deliberate. Inside, a printout of the amended deed to the house. Our house. The one she'd bragged about hosting holidays in. The one she called our forever place when the foundation was first poured. Her name was no longer on it. She blinked, scanned the document again, checked the notarization line. Date, 9 days ago, 3 days before the footage. "What is this?" she asked, voice already shaking. "A title transfer," I said evenly. "You can't just—" "I didn't just do anything. Clause 14B. You signed it when we finalized the trust agreement last spring. The clause reads, revocation upon breach of marital trust. The breach was recorded. I submitted the footage as supporting evidence to the trustee. They approved the action. It's done. She stared at me like the words were in a foreign language, like her ears had betrayed her. I didn't even know we had cameras, she said, as if that changed anything. That's not a defense, I said. It's an admission. Her hands shook slightly as she put the papers down. She tried to reach across the desk like maybe touch would change the outcome. Please, she said, we can go to counseling. We can figure this out. I leaned back in my chair, calm, settled. You used to say the house was your anchor, I said. Now it's mine. She looked down. The air between us was no longer filled with words. It was filled with everything she had never expected to lose. She stood slower this time. No more urgency. Just that heavy step of someone realizing the foundation beneath her life had shifted, without noise, without warning. And when she reached the door, she turned. You planned this, she said, barely above a whisper. I didn't deny it. She left without another word. And I sat there, hands resting on the folder, thinking about how quiet a system can be when it's built to protect you, and how devastating it is when it finally activates. She wore a beige blazer that day, the one she used for pitch meetings and polished optics. I imagine she chose it carefully, something neutral, something that said I'm fine before she even opened her mouth. But beige doesn't hide panic, not when it's stitched over fraying seams. I wasn't there when she walked into the office, but I didn't need to be. I heard from 3 people before noon. She looked shaken, didn't make eye contact with anyone. HR was waiting for her. No one smiled. At first, she played it off. Said she'd had a personal matter come up. Said she'd be working remotely for a bit. A reset, she called it, like life was a Google calendar she could rearrange to her liking. But the system didn't care about tone or stories. Her badge stopped working the next morning. The office administrator said it was probably a glitch. Those sometimes happen when there were role changes, but no one offered to fix it. And no one buzzed her in. Her assistant, a woman 10 years younger, half as experienced, was suddenly reporting to someone else. Quietly, no announcement, just a calendar shift and a new email signature. Still, she tried to hold ground. She showed up that Friday with a box of muffins and that overly bright smile, stopped by the marketing bullpen like nothing had changed, made small talk with people who nodded but didn't engage. Someone told me she laughed too loudly at her own joke. Another said she asked if there was any new direction from upstairs. They told her nothing had come down, because technically nothing had. She was still an employee, just not looped in, and that's how it works when you're written out of the system, not by scandal, not by screaming, but by quiet exclusion. The HR director didn't call her in for a meeting. The CEO didn't mention her absence at the all-hands. The whispers did the rest. Someone in legal murmured, "Trust clause triggered." They didn't say her name. They didn't need to. By week's end, she was working from home, alone, no calls, no access. Her corporate login still worked, barely. She could check her calendar. It was blank. No invites. No one copied her on team threads. And when she emailed a director she used to joke with about lunch spots, the reply came 5 hours later, "Let's circle back next quarter." That was the sentence that broke her, because it meant she wasn't urgent anymore. She wasn't relevant. No one had raised their voice. No one had publicly named the breach. But the network had moved on. It didn't need her to crash. It just needed her to stall long enough for someone else to take her place. And now she was exactly where she had put so many others before, outside the loop, watching the door close without a sound. She started curating her version of the story 2 weeks after I left. It was slow at first, subtle nods and conversation, the kind of half-truths you slip into brunch chatter and hope no one notices. "It's been a tough year," she'd say, swirling her mimosa. "He just shut down emotionally. I think he was going through something internal." Then she'd look down and press her lips together like she was protecting me, like she was the strong one for not telling more. To her circle of friends, it became a script. We just drifted. He got quiet. I tried everything. Some believed it, at least on the surface. That's the thing about charisma. It buys you time. It makes people hesitate before asking hard questions. And she had charisma in spades, perfect posture, the right tone of sadness, those well-placed pauses that made her sound like someone surviving a ghosting, not someone caught mid-lie. But Meredith never said a word, not in public, not in reply. She just waited. And then, quietly, she sent a message. No speech, no accusations, just a line dropped into a small group thread of mutuals. Timestamp, 11:42 p.m. Audio on. Nothing else, it was enough. The ones who mattered, who actually paid attention, knew what that meant. No one commented. But people watched. She didn't know it had circulated, not at first. She posted a filtered photo from a wine tasting, caption, starting fresh. Sometimes it's the ones who say the least that carry the most damage. It got fewer likes than usual, a few polite hearts, but no comments. Not even from the friends who used to hype her every post with heart emojis and inside jokes. That week, she DM'd 3 people. No one replied. A week later, she tried to organize a dinner. Just a girls' catch-up. But no one could make it. Everyone had excuses. Work, kids, travel. She pretended not to notice. But then came the bar. It was one of those dim places she used to love. Upscale but not pretentious, dark wood, clean cocktails, the kind of place you meet people who know how to keep a secret. She walked in, smiled at the hostess, scanned the tables, and then she froze. A man at the bar, someone from a former project team maybe, was sitting with his phone propped discreetly in his palm, earbuds in, watching something. His thumb hovered over the screen as he paused it. She knew that screen, the lighting, the angle, the shape of her own silhouette near the kitchen archway, her voice saying his name, that clipped whisper, that fake kiss. She didn't speak to anyone that night, just turned around and left. The fiction had cracked, not with a shout, not with some public takedown, but through quiet precision. Truth passed like a whispered warning, just enough to shift the air around her, to dull the sympathy, to turn the spotlight cold. And the worst part? She couldn't correct it. Because when people believe you once and get burned, they don't ask you for your side next time. They just stop listening. It had been almost a year. The courthouse was cold, in that way government buildings always are. Scuffed tile, flickering overhead light, the kind of silence that isn't peaceful, just exhausted. I didn't rush, just walked the corridor until I saw her through the glass panel in room 214. She was already seated at the table, alone. Her posture had changed, shoulders curled in, spine not quite straight. The blazer she wore hung loose at the arms, as if it had once belonged to someone with more certainty in her body. She didn't look up when I entered, not right away, only when the clerk called both our names. We sat across from each other, separated by polished wood and a document thick with finality. No lawyers, no arguing, just signatures. She held the pen for a second too long before writing her name. Then quietly, "You really did all this over a camera?" I looked at her for the first time in months. Her eyes didn't flash with anger or charm anymore. Just fatigue, the kind that settles in when your story no longer works and you've run out of people willing to pretend with you. I reached into my folder and pulled out a sealed envelope, placed it gently in front of her. She hesitated. Her fingers trembled slightly as she peeled it open. Inside, 4 still images, pulled directly from the footage, labeled, time-stamped, clean. 1, her face turned away, whispering into the phone. 2, the name Greg written in auto caption below her breath. 3, the kiss gesture. And 4, her smile, soft and practiced as she walked back into the room, into our home, pretending none of it happened. Taped to the last still was a small, yellow sticky note. 5 words, handwritten in black ink. "You erased more than a file." She stared at it, didn't speak, didn't blink, didn't cry, just folded the images slowly and slid them back into the envelope like handling something radioactive. I stood, signed my final line on the form, and turned to leave. No wave, no parting words. As I stepped into the hallway, I heard the chair legs scrape behind me, but no footsteps followed. I didn't look back, because closure doesn't come from their apology. It comes from your decision to end the chapter, to lock the file, and to walk out clean, silent, untouchable.